Support for today's episode comes from the Diocesan Annual Campaign. Your donation is vital in continuing our mission of evangelization and helping our community grow in their faith, love, and understanding. Support from donations helped us to produce over 57 original episodes last year that were spread across terrestrial radio, internet-based platforms, and social media outreach. This year, we're planning to share even more original content on relevant topics in the church, current events, and questions you've always wanted to hear answered. The 2024 annual campaign is now open and accepting donations. So if you've loved what you've listened to in the last 2 years of our programming, thank you so much for being a part of the Candid Catholic Convos community, and please consider making a donation to this year's campaign to help us to continue to spread the word of God across the airwaves. Welcome to Candid Catholic Convos, a program brought to you by the Catholic Diocese of Harrisburg. Our mission is to humanize the church and help you to grow in your faith, love, and understanding. I'm your host, Rachel Trochet, a cradle Catholic who's only human and struggled with faith on more than one occasion. Each week, you'll hear engaging, down-to-earth interviews and actionable strategies you can implement into your life with ease to help you grow closer to God. If you're ready to open your heart and step fully into the person God created you to be, then you're in the right place. Let's get started. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Candid Catholic Convos. I went to college in the heart of Philadelphia. It was a super busy campus, smack in the middle of downtown Philadelphia. Lots of bustling, lots of hustling, and every once in a while I'd run into someone or a group of people preaching their line of thinking. Now, I went to college during an election year, so a lot of the times these were political groups proclaiming their ideology, but every so often it would be a group of religious people. These religious groups came in all shapes and sizes. Some were loud, some were boisterous, others came with full-blown presentations. I remember one had a 7-foot-tall sign and a megaphone. What I remember most was literally trying to run and hide from all of them. I used to thank God campus was pretty much always crowded, always a sea of people for me to hide behind and allowing me to never make contact with any of them. Once in a long while, I'd get caught. Someone would spot me or the cross around my neck and start grilling me on my faith or what I believed in, and I always felt cornered. Like I had to have all the answers or I wasn't good enough. And saying I was Catholic, I may as well have been walking around with a target on my back. I knew what I believed in, and that was enough. I didn't need to prove it to anyone. So I would, as politely as I could, decline to participate and move on. There was one group, though, that I always acknowledged. It was usually one or two older men dressed in suits, even if it was 90 degrees. And they very quietly and nonchalantly would hand me a pocket-sized New Testament. To this day, I have no idea what church they were from. They never caused a fuss or announced anything. They just handed out these little green books, maybe once a semester, and went on with their day. I must have like 6 of them still. I randomly find them as I'm cleaning. I read a statistic that roughly 70% of Catholics are afraid to share their faith or participate in evangelization. If they're anything like me, it may have to do with the types of evangelization we've been exposed to in the past, or misconceptions we may have about it. I don't consider myself a theological scholar by any stretch of the imagination. What do I know? What if they have questions and I don't have the answers? How am I supposed to share with someone or convince them being Catholic is something they should consider? Pope Francis says that all Catholics are called to evangelize, but he's the Pope, and I'm just me. So what are we as Catholics called to do? How can we make the process of evangelization not weird and uncomfortable for both us and whomever we're speaking to? Deacon Gregory Amarante from our Catholic Life and Evangelization team and Dr. Jim Gregory, Director of Religious Education for St. Columba Parish and School, are here to walk us through the reality of what evangelization is and isn't, what our responsibility is as Catholics, and how we can apply it to our everyday lives. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me on Candid Catholic Convos. I'm really excited to talk about this topic of evangelization because it's something that the Pope has called us to do, but Catholics aren't necessarily jazzed about evangelization at least from personal experience. So I would love to talk to you more about how we can kind of incorporate this into our everyday lives. So let's start with obviously the hardest question, which tends to be the hardest question for most of my guests, which is tell me a little bit about yourselves.
Well, I'm Jim Gregory. I retired as a trauma surgeon in 2020, right after COVID. And, I retired because I had to have emergency open heart surgery.
Oh, wow.
And I had actually left the faith for about 27 years, really got involved with secular humanism. I'm just a good person. I never stopped believing in God, but I had left, and but I came back. And I think that's going to be part of our story when we talk here. And, I had an encounter with God just before my open heart surgery, and basically told me that I was going to survive, but I had more to do. And I wound up searching and ultimately wound up completing now a master's in theology and educational ministry. And I am the director of religious education for St. Columba Parish and School.
That's wonderful.
So I'm Deacon Gregory Amarante. I am the diocesan secretary for Catholic Life and Evangelization. I've been in this role for about 2.5 years now. And prior to that, I was in secular employment, but still a deacon, about 13 years now. So I also was somebody who did not stay within the faith. I went into fundamental Protestantism for about 13 years. Came back. We have another recording on that you can watch where my wife and I talk about our conversion to Catholicism, and happy to be here with Doc and to help define and understand evangelization from a Catholic viewpoint.
Likewise.
I love that. It's a running theme in this room because I was born and raised Catholic, but then I stepped away for a very long time and then kind of came back. So it's a nice theme that we have going here, that we all kind of came back to Catholicism. So for those who may not know, can you tell me a little bit more about what St. Paul Street Evangelization is?
Okay, so I do. I want to use their website because this is a specific organization that we've asked to come and do some training for us, and then they train us, and then we can train some other people on what street evangelization looks like for Catholics. But it also helps us with our own story of evangelization. It doesn't always have to be street evangelization. So St. Paul Street Evangelization is a grassroots, nonprofit organization dedicated to responding to the mandate of Jesus to preach the gospel to all nations by taking the Catholic faith to the streets. So that's pretty much what they do. They come into a parish, help you understand what evangelization is, and then teach you how to do non-confrontational, genuine and joyful witness to your faith outside, whether it's on the streets or in your personal life. That's what we're looking to do.
That makes a lot of sense. So then let's expand on what the term evangelization means and why it's important for us as Catholics who, I don't have a degree in theology. I didn't study anything other than what I was taught in Catholic school. So how can someone like me, who is just a regular lay person, engage in evangelization?
I think that's a great question, Rachel. And it's because, evangelization is one of those, I don't know how many letters are in it, but people kind of shorten it down and go, they duck and cover when they hear it. And I think perhaps a little bit of, for me, a little education on it, because I felt the same way. I'm like, oh my gosh, that means you're standing out on the street corner with a Bible saying, repent or you're going to go to hell. And, it's not that. So the root of the word for gospel comes from euangelion, which means a great announcement. It was what the Romans did when they announced something wonderful coming from the emperor. It was supposed to mean a joyous occasion. People would go out into the streets and celebrate because of this. And so evangelization, the word means to spread fantastic news, wonderful news. And so how you do that is different. You have posters, you could have signs, you could have a radio show, or you could just have a big, huge smile on your face. And so evangelizing has so many different meanings to it. And it's really like, how would you invite people to the best party ever?
Well said. Yeah. And, the core of it from the Catholic faith is about that good news. That is the good news, that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. He is one with the Father, Trinity of persons, and that he has personal involvement in my life. And that has changed my life. It affects my life in such a way that I want to share that with other people so that they can have that experience and have freedom from sin, freedom from death, and look forward to eternity in heaven.
Exactly. And all of us drifted away from the faith for various reasons. Probably could do a whole series just on that. But what brought us back? It probably wasn't somebody screaming the Bible in front of us. It probably wasn't somebody screaming. It was probably through acts of love, simple acts of love. And it's interesting because, Rodney Stark in his book on the rise of Christianity, where he goes back and looks at the early roots, during the first 3 centuries, Christianity grew by 40% every year, 40% new people. And at the same time, something happened. And it was that they noticed that when plagues came through, the Christian communities survived better. And what they realized, it was the way they lived. They took care of each other. They just took care of each other. They were kind. They fed each other. They took care of the sick. And it's that kind of thing that we're looking for. How do you relate to people? How do you let them, like the song, let them know, they'll know we're Christians by our love.
You mentioned something there, and we've hit on it twice already. What is not evangelization, right? So it's not this caricature that we see of, and it's typically, I think, people picking on the Protestants about the Bible thumper or the fire and brimstone, right? That's just too easy. That's the straw man that we go to when we think of evangelization, and we say, well, I don't want to do that. And we have to get beyond the straw man and say, well, wait, okay, what is authentic evangelization look like? And you got to that in the second half of what you were saying there, where you're talking about evangelization is action that is preceded by a word. The word is spoken to us, yes, we receive it, and therefore it changes us and it impels us forward to do what is good, what is right, and to kind of set examples for others. But it's never just action. It is always accompanied by a word, and we always have to be ready, as St. Peter says, right, to give an answer, right? So, and we have to be willing to share that answer. And if we haven't evaluated our own relationship to God, our own relationship to Jesus Christ as the Son of God who saved us, then we're not going to be equipped for evangelization.
Yeah, I think you do. You have to be a disciple first. So you have to strengthen your own faith, because that's got to be primary in you. You've got to have that within you. But then when you go to share it, you have to want to share it, and that comes from this love that the deacon's talking about. And when so people are afraid. They're like, oh, like you said, I'm not a theologian. I'm not that. I haven't memorized chapter and verse. That's not it. That's not the core. The core is what you're feeling inside and how you're going to project that. And then, it's good to go out and learn more about your faith so you can do that. But evangelization is showing God's love that's in you to someone else.
Very well said. And I remember just when we were talking about, the Bible thumpers and just the grand displays of what I guess other people believe is evangelization. I remember being in college, and like during the busiest times of like classes switching during campus was when you would see a lot of those people. Like I remember somebody had like a 7-foot sign and a megaphone, and like they'd see the cross around my neck and be like, let me ask you something. And I would immediately retreat because I'm like, I don't know it well enough. Like I'm too afraid to speak about it. And I would just, hope that the display of the cross and the way that I carried myself was enough. But the Pope calls us to to something a little bit more, but I read that 70% of Catholics feel uncomfortable talking to others, probably a lot like I do. You know, we don't want to be aggressive and confrontational in the way that we guide people to the faith. We talked about tactfully sharing. How do we do that in a way that isn't like hitting somebody over the head with the Bible and saying you're doing it wrong, you know? Because I that's obviously not the way that we're supposed to be doing it.
Well, I'm going to start at the end of what you said. And that is, everyone's afraid to talk about their faith because they say, somebody's going to ask me a question I don't know the answer to. That's okay. If they're asking you the question and you don't know the answer, you know where you can find it. You come to deacon, or you come to your local priest, or you come to a theologian that you might know. You know, you can find the answer for them, because guess what? None of us know all the answers. We're talking about God. But so I think if you're asking for some steps people can use, first of all, don't worry. You don't have to know it all. You just have to live it. And there's a great book called The Way God Teaches. And Professor White, in that, he looked at the Bible and he said, what techniques does God use? Because maybe we should imitate the best teacher of all. Okay? And he found 5. He said, God meets us where we're at. So the first thing you do is you go, wow, you want to talk about that? Let's go have some pizza. Let's sit down. Let's talk about it. Think about the Samaritan at the well. Okay? He first talked to her. He didn't evangelize her right away. All right? And then he addresses their needs. Address their needs. Maybe they're afraid of something. So be real with the person. And form a relationship first so they trust you. Then they're going to be more willing to ask you the hard questions. And you're going to be more willing to go, gosh, I don't know either. Let's go look it up together. So I think that's one thing that the beginner can do, that anyone can do.
I agree with the sense that you shouldn't expect to have all the answers. It was a Catholic who didn't have all the answers who took on my challenge when I tried to convert him out of the Catholic faith. And he would answer what he could answer, and what he didn't know, he'd say, you know what, I'm going to have to do some work on that. I'll come back with an answer for you. And he would always come back with an answer. He then was able to build a whole, what we call an apologetics class, which means just reasons for your faith, off of our 3-year exchange, which then led me back to the Catholic Church. Wow. So that simple action of saying, you know, I don't know. Let me go.
Well, I think you trust that man more because he's willing to admit he doesn't know everything. The person who knows everything, you immediately are suspicious about. Wait a minute, how can anybody know everything? And we got politicians out there right now who know everything, right? So,
and the other thing I would say, you know, in that relationship, the relationship has to be for the person's own sake. Like, you have to be interested in them for their own good, not because you're winning something. And that's where evangelization goes wrong. That can't be what you're doing here. This isn't another victory, in a sense, for Christ, even though it is victory in a way. But it's not because I look at what I'm doing here, and I got to meet this person, and I got to convert them, and then I got to.
How many can I convert this week? Right,
exactly.
Yeah. And that, you know, that's important. God even tells us that. Jesus tells us, no one comes to me except the Father sends him. Okay, so all we do is water or plant seeds. We shouldn't be expecting that we're going to go out there and we're going to do better than Jesus. I mean, 500 people walked away from him when he gave the Bread of Life discourse. Okay, so that's why this relationship component, being real with the person, being honest like the gentleman was with you, Deacon, is important, because then they'll ask you, then they'll open up. It's just like any other relationship, right? You don't meet somebody at a local bar or restaurant and immediately tell them all the horrible things that helped you when you were 12 years old. I mean, it just doesn't happen that way.
And when it comes to like a question, let's just say, what do you share? Like, how do I evangelize, right? You simply tell what you know. I know that when I'm at Mass and I receive the Eucharist and I'm praying after receiving the Eucharist, those are some of the most intimate moments I have with Jesus. That's witnessing right there. Yeah. That's just telling your story. And they can say, well, that's not really Jesus. And and they can ask you a dozen questions that make you afraid, but you don't have to be, because it doesn't matter what their question is. What matters is what you know in your heart and what your personal experience of Jesus is. And you can say, this is how Jesus has come to me. I know he's come to me here, just as much as I know that you're sitting across the table from me now.
When you talked about coming back, my coming back, the people around me, they were faithful. They went to church and they went to Mass and they made all the whole, but they never made a big deal about it. They still loved me, but they said, but this is important too. And that genuineness, I'm like, okay, they're not just doing this because I have to do it. Mm-hmm. They were doing it because it meant something to them. So, and they meant something to me. So if I trusted this person and that meant that much to me, maybe I should look at it again. Maybe I should look at what they do. We change our minds a lot because of things like that, Some people call it peer pressure. I just call it loving. I mean.
So I think a summary to answer that question, going to some of your points from the book, right? We got to meet people where they're at. Mm-hmm. We have to have a genuine interest in them for their own sake, because we really want a friendship with them.
Absolutely.
Right? Which goes to the point of addressing their needs or being incarnational to them, right? God came to us as man, and we go to them as friends. And from there, you just tell what you know and be honest about what you know. And if you don't know and they have questions that they want you to answer, then by all means, take some time. The internet is replete with good Catholic resources, let alone talking to somebody like Jim or I, right? So find an answer and say, let's get back together and talk about that.
I kind of want to expand on it a little bit because, I might sound super personable on the radio, but in person, I am painfully shy. I am not, I'm what I like to call an extroverted introvert, where I can kind of turn on the charm, but then it really depletes me and I just kind of retreat into myself later. And if I don't have to interact with somebody, I won't. But for other people out there, it can be very debilitating. So how do we build up the courage to kind of take action and to do something that we should be doing?
I think I would like to reemphasize what Deacon just said a little bit ago. Your goal shouldn't be to get up in the morning and say, I think I'm going to tell one person about God. It isn't a mission for yourself. So if you take that off, what you're really looking at, and I think in my mind, this is my opinion, is that, when you're with somebody who already trusts you or is already a friend, and they say something that you think maybe they're on the wrong track, or maybe they don't have it quite right, and you're already in that relationship, that's the time to kind of bring it up. And a good friend wants the best for their friend, right? They don't want them to go off the wrong track. So I think if you're a shy person, you wait for the relationships first. And then when the opportunity comes, be strong enough in your faith to say, well, the whole idea of having whatever just doesn't sound like it's good for you to me. And then you can move into that, thinking about the dignity of that person for you. That's evangelizing.
Yeah, I agree. When you put the pressure on yourself to kind of perform this evangelization thing, and you're as if it's lurking around every corner, right? And in a way, it kind of is. But you become the kind of person that people do then want to maybe inquire about something with, because of the way you are working on your own holiness and the way you're carrying yourself in your life. And you don't have to be perfect, and that's the great thing. If in your failures, especially with the people that are around you in your workplace or in your family, is to be the kind of person who acknowledges when they've done something to offend or hurt somebody else too. So all of that leads people to that level of inquiring with you or wanting to know more. But sometimes it does mean that you might have to kind of step into a place and say, you know what, let's talk about a decision you're making, and you can give a Catholic viewpoint because there's certain morality tied around that, and that you think that you're in a place where that relationship allows you to do that, and you can be as gentle as you need to be in that, and honor the fact that they have their own free will in this. Mm-hmm. Right? You're not going to force this. And if you think that that you've got to plant the seed, water it, make it grow, we already know from Scripture, you don't know where you are in that process. So realize that you might be the person planting the seed. You might be the person who came along and watering it, right? You gotta acknowledge that as you go out into the world on a regular basis.
Yeah, I mean that's beautiful, and I think God doesn't coerce us into loving Him. Okay, He gave us free choice in the beginning, and we said, "Yep, nope, we want to have the apple," right? So, but He wants us to love. So you want love that's genuine and given to you, and we don't want people to be confrontational. However, you also have to stand up for what you believe. In our current environment with the cancel culture, it's almost like you can't have an opinion of your own. It's the opposite of what God has told us. We are free to have our own opinions, whether it's wrong or right. And so if you're in a situation with people that you know and trust, I wouldn't do this with people you just met today, but if you're a shy person, you're with your friends and they're all going off onto, oh, we all got to have, I don't know, X to make us a better person. And you're like, aren't you good enough where you're at? I mean, talking to them, maybe standing up for your beliefs. I'll guarantee you there's some people in that group who are just waiting for somebody to say, no, I don't want to do that. And then they'll go, no, I don't want to either. Okay? And maybe three of the five are going to go off and do what they want to do. But that other person, you've just evangelized. You've just helped them have the strength to resist a temptation.
In regard to something like St. Paul Street evangelization, right? This is a little different, right? We're going out there now, and we're saying we're here. But what are we here to do? We're here to pray with you. We're here to listen to you. We're here to get to know you a little bit better. But the last thing we're here to do is to make you feel bad about yourself, to tell you about all the things you're doing wrong as a human person, because we're all fallen.
We've unfortunately run out of time, but if you'd like to hear the rest of this episode, you can listen to us anytime on Spotify under Candid Catholic Convos, or you can download this episode from our website at hbgdiocese.org. Thank you so much for listening. Our goal at the Diocese of Harrisburg is to walk with you on your faith journey. So if this episode resonated with you in any way, the easiest way to show your appreciation is by sharing this program with your network or by leaving a review on your listening platform. You can also support us financially by making a donation online at hbgdiocese.org/DAC and clicking the Make a Donation button. Thanks again, and we'll see you at church on Sunday.